Attorney General Jeff Sessions says most victims of gang violence and domestic abuse will not qualify for asylum. In a ruling issued Monday, the Attorney General told immigration judges to stop granting asylum to most victims of domestic violence and most victims of gang violence. Critics say the order endangers thousands of asylum seekers, mostly women. For more on this, I want to bring in Julissa Arce. She's a political commentator and best-selling author of My Underground American Dream, My True Story as an Undocumented Immigrant Who Became a Wall Street Executive. Julissa, thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me.
First of all, what's your response to Attorney General Jeff Sessions' decision regarding asylum?
Yeah, well, you know, what's happening with this administration is that they're constantly looking for ways not just to criminalize undocumented immigrants, but to stop legal immigration. So someone presenting themselves at the border to seek asylum is a legal pathway to come here. The latest attack on immigrants being that we will no longer give asylum to victims of domestic violence is really unconscionable, especially in this era of Me Too and Time's Up, where the administration is saying that they support women, but we are literally turning women back into the hands of the people who are harming them. And that's unconscionable. It's crazy to think that we've made so much progress so that a woman who has been a victim of domestic violence can come to this country to seek asylum, and now we're saying we're no longer going to accept those applications. We're going to turn our back on you and send you back to your abuser, and that is unconscionable.
What about the legal claim, though, argued by Attorney General Sessions and other people who say that claims of domestic violence or gang violence do not meet the criteria of asylum, which is a, quote, well-founded fear of persecution based on race, religion, nationality, political opinion, or membership in a social group?
Yeah, well, the Attorney General is really alone in this standing, because even 15 different immigration judges, past and present, have written a letter to the Attorney General to say you are basically undoing 15 years of work. It's not like there was a case that really set the precedence for abuse, for people of domestic violence to be able to present their asylum cases, and it was 15 years of work in order for that to happen. So it's not like just one day somebody showed up and we said, yes, you qualify. There's been a lot of work that has been done by legal scholars that make the case for why someone who is a victim of domestic violence can in fact present a case for asylum. It is a group you can be part of this group of someone who has been abused domestically that can present an asylum case. So the Attorney General is really alone in this standing.
Well, some lawmakers have argued that more narrowly defining who the U.S. grants asylum to is a way to fix what's really been a massive backlog of these kinds of asylum cases. What do you say to that?
Well, I think that the way to really fix this is to, instead of spending so much money at the border, instead of spending so much money in trying to deport people, we should be spending resources in trying to have more immigration judges so that they can process these claims faster, so that we can get the people who, sometimes it takes 15 years for someone to make their asylum case. So it is true that there is a big backlog, but we should be spending resources in order to make that asylum cases go faster, not just turning people away because we can't keep up.
I want to ask you specifically about unaccompanied children. The Miami Herald is reporting that the president is looking to build tent cities to house unaccompanied children. Why are we seeing such an increase in the number of unaccompanied children who are seeking asylum in this country?
The reason we're seeing such a large number of asylum seekers at the border, and frankly, this number is actually down from the numbers that we saw in 2012 when we really did have a crisis of unaccompanied minors. What's happening now is that we're actually creating unaccompanied minors because we are ripping families apart. There are people showing up at the border to seek asylum as a family unit, and we are ripping their 18-month-old 3-year-old children away from them and putting them in literal cages. There are pictures that that viewers can see of children in cages, and And it's really a fabrication again, and it's a result of the policies that are coming out of the Justice Department.
I want to ask about your own personal experience as an undocumented immigrant. You wrote a book about it, and it's fascinating, your background, because you were vice president at Goldman Sachs while in the country as an undocumented immigrant. Tell me a little bit about that experience.
Yeah, you know, I've had a perhaps what might seem like a unique story, but it really, there's a lot of people who have a very similar story of finding success in America despite being undocumented. I came to this country when I was 11 years old through no choice of my own. My parents brought me here. I was very fortunate that I came here on a plane with a visa, because when it came to adjusting my status, I had a pathway. When my husband is an American citizen, and that's how I was able to adjust my status. But before marrying him, there really was no pathway to citizenship for someone like me. And today, there is no pathway for citizenship for hundreds and thousands of young undocumented people in this country. I was very fortunate to be able to go to college and eventually become a vice president at Goldman Sachs. And that's when I realized I have this really powerful story to tell that can hopefully shift the conversation around immigration, and it can give a different perspective of the people who come here. Because a lot of times what the administration wants to highlight as the immigrants that come here are MS-13 gang members, and that's not what we are, and that's not why we come here.
Just one last question. For people who would be sympathetic to situations like yours, where you were brought to this country as a child illegally, but say, nevertheless, there is such a thing as rule of law in this country, and the fact is, if those laws are not enforced, that is eventually what leads to a breakdown. What would you say to those people?
Yeah, you know, I think that I understand that perspective. I didn't come here illegally. I came here on a plane with a tourist visa, so it's a perfectly legal way to come here. When I think about the young undocumented people who are still undocumented in this country, and we tell them to get in the back of the line, to do it the right way, what I would say to that, the very short answer is that the line that we often talk about doesn't exist. There is no line that people who are undocumented in this country can get in. And the few pathways that do exist, that's what we're seeing the administration shut down, whether it's people who want to seek asylum because they were victims of domestic violence, whether it's people who want to come to this country to start businesses, to employ American citizens. Every avenue of legal immigration is also being attacked. And so I would say to those viewers, there is more to the story than meets the eye.
All right, Julissa Arce, we'll have to leave it there. Thank you so much for stopping by.
Thank you so much for having me.